every human culture has a set of creation myths, but they're in the realm of mythology or religion or folklore, and they are, of course, all mutually inconsistent. The great thing that is happening in our time is that we are able, through a method which can actually make some progress towards the real universe out there, to find out something about origins, and this is the scientific method applied to the science of cosmology. So I know that's not a direct answer to your question, but I thought it was more important to address the issue of feeling unhappy because it wasn't immediately understandable.
Well, yes, I find that extremely soothing, actually, because it is a kind of sort of formidable task of grasping this. It makes me want to retreat into trivial questions like, is this idea of predicting backwards going to put astrologers out of business?
Nothing will put astrologers out of business.
Well, alas. The viewers of this program do to make a difference in correcting these problems?
They can make sure that candidates who don't understand and aren't deeply committed to ending and reversing the nuclear arms race, to stopping greenhouse warming, and to stopping the depletion of the ozonosphere, that those guys aren't, men and women, are not elected. It's not enough to have a candidate say, I'm an environmentalist. In what way are you an environmentalist, Mr. or Ms. candidate? Take a look at the most recent election. There we had a candidate who said that he was an environmentalist. He, in contrast to the previous 8 years, where we had an uncompromising anti-environmentalist in the White House, okay, now there's a president, Mr. Bush, who at least acknowledges that there's a problem. We didn't even know that from listening to Mr. Reagan. But if you look at Mr. Bush's budget, we see not a hint of any real commitment to the environment. So I say, in a democracy, that's the most important thing a person can do. There are a lot of other things a person can do. You can plant trees. Every individual can plant trees. That's something that's very constructive. You can boycott industries which are irresponsible on global warming and on chlorofluorocarbons. There are many things people can do, but they have to understand the issue before they can do those things.
Well,
The story of Noah's Ark is, of course, a story. The books of the various great religions, Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic, Jewish, Christian, and many others, are filled with stories. That doesn't mean we are to interpret them literally, and there are all sorts of problems with the Noah's Ark story, one of which is kangaroos. How did the kangaroos get to Australia if you literally believe the story of Noah's Ark? So I'm sure you meant that in a light tone, and my response is likewise. How to keep kids in school? Well, kids, I believe, are fundamentally very smart, and if they see school being taught by people who themselves are not interested in it, people who cannot do very well at teaching, if what they're being taught has no practical application, then why should they do it? So, for example, there's an awful lot of kids graduating high school who go into entry-level jobs in the service economy, waiting on tables, slinging hash, and so on. Now, do they get more money if they were good in second-year algebra? The answer is no. And they understand that. If there were more jobs that required this kind of education, there would be more kids who would go into that kind of education with some enthusiasm. If there were a connection between how well you did in school and how fast your salary increased later, as there is in many countries, kids would be much more interested.
Well, it's certainly what I'm talking about in the demon-haunted world. My feeling, Charlie, is that it's not that pseudoscience and superstition and New Age so-called beliefs and fundamentalist zealotry are something new. They've been with us for as long as we've been human. But we live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers.
Science and technology are propelling us forward at accelerating rates.
That's right. And if we don't understand it, by we I mean the general public, if it's something that, oh, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? Just some members of Congress? But there's no more than a handful of members of Congress with any background in science at all. And the Republican Congress has just abolished its own Office of Technology Assessment, the organization that gave them bipartisan, competent advice on science and technology. They say, we don't want to know. Don't tell us about science and technology.
Surprising, because Gingrich is genuinely interested, I think, in these kinds of things, as a, out of his own intellectual curiosity. Does the president still have a science advisor? in the
He
White
does.
House?
He does. John Gibbon, and the vice president is
He's
scientifically
well known for
literate.
being
Yes.
scientifically a science maven. I mean, you blast them all. Creationists, Christian scientists who you say would rather allow their children to suffer than give them insulin or antibiotics. Astrologers come in for particular scorn on your part.
Well, I would say scorn, just derision.
Derision. A more generous version of scorn. But what's the danger of all this? I mean, you know, this is not the thing that...
There's two kinds of dangers. One is what I just talked about, that we've arranged a society based on science and technology, in which nobody understands anything about science and technology. And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it? And the second reason that I'm worried about this is that science is more than a body of knowledge. It's a way of thinking, a way of skeptically interrogating the universe with a fine understanding of human fallibility. If we are not able to ask skeptical questions, to interrogate those who tell us that something is true, to be skeptical of those in authority, then we're up for grabs for the next charlatan, political or religious, who comes ambling along. It's a thing that Jefferson laid great stress on. It wasn't enough, he said, to enshrine some rights in a constitution or a Bill of Rights. The people had to be educated, and they had to practice their skepticism and their education. Otherwise, we don't run the government. The government runs us.
You know, we humans come and go and briefly set foot on the stage and then exit. But that's just very small potatoes compared to what the Earth is involved with and knows about. I think the essence of the scientific method is the willingness to admit you're wrong, the willingness to abandon ideas that don't work, and the essence of religion is not to change anything. That supposed truths are handed down by some revered figure, and then no one is supposed to make any progress beyond that because all the truth is thought to be in hand.
I'm really talking about setting an agenda for the future.
My sense is that the scientific way of thinking, questioning, some delicate mix of creative encouragement of new ideas and the most rigorous and skeptical scrutiny of new and old ideas, I think that is the path to the future, not just for science, but for all human institutions. We have to be willing to challenge because we are in desperate need of change.
The resources is they went into increasing budgets for arms. Isn't that where the money went?
That and making rich people richer. Those are the two places.
Well, the thing about rich people, and being one, I guess, is the money all gets reinvested. If you've got money, you put it in the bank lends it out to people to buy homes or cars or
but
whatever.
Not poor people. But not poor people.
Well, that's a good point.
It tends to stay up at that highly stratified, very...
More people get employed with capital formation and so forth. Are you a socialist?
I'm not sure what a socialist is,
Well,
but I believe that the government has a responsibility to care for the people. I'm not talking about dole. I'm talking about making people self-reliant, people able to take care of themselves. There are countries which are perfectly able to do that. The United States is an extremely rich country. It's perfectly able to do that. It chooses not to. It chooses to have homeless people. We are 19th in the world in infant mortality. 18 other countries save the lives of their babies better than we. How come? They just spend more money on it. They care about their babies more than we care about ours. I think it's a disgrace. And this country has vast wealth. You just look at what something like Star Wars. The money spent on Star Wars, already spent $20 billion on it. If these guys are permitted to go ahead, they will spend $1 trillion on Star Wars. Think of what that money could be used for to educate, to help, to bring people up to a sense of self-confidence, to improve not just the happiness of people in America, but their economic standing, to improve the competitiveness of the United States compared to other countries. We are using money for the wrong stuff.
Well, it's always used as an argument to make no changes whatever. Any change will lose jobs. So, for example, the A-12, the Navy fighter that was just canceled because it was absurdly over its cost estimates. There will be thousands of aerospace workers who will lose their jobs. Is that a good reason to pour additional billions of dollars into this rat hole? No, it's not. And if we were really concerned about losing jobs, we would have a federal job retraining program. We would have much better education at all levels in science and technology so people could move from one job to another. But we're not interested in that. The losing job argument is just trotted out for political convenience so that we don't have to make a change. No question, there are massive changes needed. Other countries seem perfectly able to make those changes, but we are not.
Imagine a room awash in gasoline, and there are two implacable enemies in that room. One of them has 9,000 matches. The other has 7,000 matches. Each of them is concerned about who's ahead, who's stronger. Well, that's the kind of situation we are actually in. The amount of weapons that are available to the United States and the Soviet Union are so bloated, so grossly in excess of what's needed to dissuade the other, that if it weren't so tragic, it would be laughable. What is necessary is to reduce the matches and to clean up the gasoline.
The system was a lot more traffic in it than there is now. And a lot of that debris we know from the exploration of Halley's Comet, for example. Comets are very rich in organic matter. So the stuff of life was falling on the Earth. Now, is that the hand of God or not? Well, if you believe in God, God established the physical laws of the universe, and chemistry is a consequence of physics, so all those molecules that led to life were made by God. It's possible to believe that. I'm not opposed to that idea. I just say there is no evidence for it. And where there's no evidence, I say keep an open mind. Don't commit yourself in the absence of compelling evidence. And you can see it. This is, it looks like more than a dot, but it is in fact less than a pixel, a single picture element in size. In this color picture you can see that it is slightly blue, and this is where we live, on a blue dot. Astronomy has always been said to be a humbling experience, and I think these pictures underscore that point. And the next slide. Oh, no, it was lightning fast. Can we go back to that? That's it. So here are the 6 of the 9 planets imaged in this portrait. The 3 smallest planets, Mercury, Mars, and Pluto, we were unable to photograph. The appearance of the Earth in this pseudo-sunbeam is just an accident. It was no special significance is to be attributed to a beam of light lighting it up. All, of course, are in reflected sunlight. Well, on that blue dot, that's where everyone you know and everyone you ever heard of and every human being who ever lived out their lives. It's a very small stage in a great cosmic arena. And again, just speaking for myself, I think this perspective underscores our responsibility to preserve and cherish that blue dot, the only home we have.